Welcome to Keeping the Lights On. I'm your host, Todd Reed, and on this podcast, I connect with the owners and pros who design, build, and maintain our electrical, communications, and industrial world to explore the best ways forward. Tom Gale is joining the show today to help me break all that down and more. Tom is the CEO at MDM, a leading research, analytical, and educational provider in wholesale distribution. Tom brings over 30 years of experience in strategy, market research, and analytics in industrial products and wholesale distribution markets. Be sure to also check out the link in the show notes to the MDM podcast, where you can learn more about the work MDM is doing. In this episode, we are diving into the current state of the supply chain, how stronger partnerships may be the solution to the supply chain woes, and where you can find the best sandwiches in Gun Barrel, Colorado. While everyone is talking about impact to revenue and frustrations brought on by supply chain problems, in this episode, we are going to look forward so we can help you be successful in the coming months. Let's get into the show. Well, Tom, we like to start each episode by celebrating that thing that brings us all together, all these different people we talk to and work with. And that's the food that fuels our crews. It's something that's common everywhere. So what is a common go-to spot for meals in your company? Like, where is it located? What impact does it have on your team morale? Where is it?
So it's a sandwich place called Snarfs, Snarfs. So we're located just 20-something miles north of Denver. And it started 20-something years ago in Boulder, Colorado, literally in a shack. And they refer to it as such on their website, the original place. They now have like 20 locations, not only around Colorado, but in St. Louis, Austin, Texas. That they even just recently opened up a place out at the Denver airport. So you know when these food places open up an airport place, they've kind of reached the next level.
Oh yeah,
it was this really funky place that still kind of keeps the characteristics, and so that's the go-to place for our team.
Do you know how that came to be? I'm just curious if you know that.
Well, what happened was, so we've always been pretty remote, and we have people from Boston out to California, but about half our team's here in Colorado, and we don't have that big of a team. But once we started coming back post-COVID to the office, we started having people come back once a week. And so, partly just to incentivize, partly just to kind of be able to get together in a room and not in front of a camera and a screen. Mm-hmm. We started buying lunch for people, every week. And it just kind of default, we go to some of the chain stuff, the Paneras of the world and this and that. But pretty quickly, everybody was on board and it's like, well, where do you want to eat now? And it's like, let's go there. And the reason is it's this kind of deli place, but it's, they have hit on a formula that is, they're pretty killer.
Yeah. Sounds great. What's your favorite sandwich there?
Well, I'm going to be careful here, but it's called the Mother Clucker.
I've heard of that one.
And it's a rotisserie chicken, but they do a couple different sandwiches, and I mean they've probably got 24 standard. Then they have a not on the menu where they have some specialty stuff, and they're not afraid to go out where sandwiches have never gone before. They have some really unique and interesting combinations as well as some of the standards.
Well, that does, and you're right. We do have a Snarfs out here. I think I've been there one time, but for sure, I need to get out there to the Denver area, visit you, and we need to go hit up Snarfs. So thanks for sharing that. So you speaking about Snarfs has me thinking about something that happened to me a couple of weeks ago that got me thinking about this interview that I knew was coming up. I was at my local deli grocer, and there was a sign in the somewhat empty chips section that looked like to me had been designed by the chip maker. And it's a big name brand that we would all know all the brands they sell and make. But it looked like it was designed by them for the consumption by their distributors and by their grocers. And what it was is it was lots of pretty cute little graphics and charts and things talking about how their cheese levels were down and their barbecue was up and their, flavorings, which ones are up and down, and their strategy for how they were going to fulfill the supply chain with bigger bags, smaller bags, whatever their plan was. I even took a picture of it because I guess I'm a supply chain nerd. But it got me thinking about this conversation because I'm like, wow, how mainstream has the supply chain become? In the past, 2 years ago, you and I and, our people we work with knew about supply chain and we used that terminology. But I would say even some of our customers didn't even use supply chain often, right? It was more like I go to my supply house or the manufacturer has this or doesn't have that. But now people are really acutely aware of the supply chain and the impact. So I think that's a positive for people in your and my world, right? That people are starting to see the importance of that. All right, so let's lay the groundwork. What do you believe is the current state of the supply chain issues that companies are facing today?
I'd say confusing, frustrating, but getting better. And that's the soundbite. But the reality is it's all over the place, Todd. I think what we've learned over the last 2.5 years is just how much we've come to take for granted the incredible strength and flexibility of our supply chain. Like PPE, nobody really knew or thought about supply chain. It's been this hidden infrastructure that's really the backbone of the economy. It's like the studs and framing in a house, really. You don't see it behind the drywall, but it's the only reason it's standing, right? So right. Our team spends most of our waking hours tracking supply chain channels. And it's this hidden sector of the economy that's the circulatory system. It's the beating heart, really. So more than a third of U.S. gross domestic product flows through some form of wholesale distribution supply chain channel. It's incredibly fragmented. It's incredibly flexibility. And that flexibility has really been challenged over the last couple of years. But I think where we are today is we're seeing it coming back. People are adjusting. And I do believe it's coming back better and stronger than ever before. So whether you're looking at industrial, construction, or other market sectors, I think, we're hearing that backlogs are getting better overall. But we've gone to this just-in-time mindset from that for many, many years to just in case. People don't want to run out of stuff. And so we're seeing some of those unintended consequences right now in this part of the cycle.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just in case, I would say that definitely happened in force a couple of years ago. Okay, so the number one goal in businesses, and definitely in all the businesses that we're talking about up and down the supply chain, is contributing or creating as much value as possible, right? It's not just, hey, Tom, here's a product, thanks, and that's our relationship. I need to provide value to you in that distribution, in that supply chain. And I think leaders think about this. How do I add value to the people I work with? So what do you think is preventing leaders from doing that right now when it comes to, working with their up and down supply chain?
I think there's a couple things going on there. First, I think we're feeling this impact of the lack of transparency that's been a part of that extended global supply chain. A lot of people, it's kind of like each part of the chain has only seen so far back or so far forward, and it's been so reliable. It's been like clockwork. It's worked pretty well. But I think where we are right now, it's kind of like when we're driving on the interstate around the city, right? And you come to a dead stop and there's nothing going on. It's all clear ahead, but it takes like 5 minutes or more for traffic to get back into a more normal flow pattern. So I think that's some of the element here in terms of where we are right now. And it kind of goes from that shift from we were so accustomed to this just in time and then we came to this screeching halt. So, this is a global wave. And so it takes time. This adjustment is just, it doesn't happen overnight. The other issue I think that's going on here is around noise. Business leaders have been playing whack-a-mole with all these different issues. And it's just one thing after another, how to best serve customers in a pandemic environment, how to get projects out the door, production lines stabilized, people issues, inflation. It's really been one thing after another. And we're still in it, and it's become the new normal.
Yeah. So, do you have any examples of that noise or some of those factors affecting someone?
Yeah, I think this is still going on. I think there's tons of examples of customers are still placing orders that we're seeing with multiple vendors to hedge their bets. They do not want to be left without. Most distributors I talk with, they are selling just about anything they can get in the door. So they're doing the same thing to their vendors as well. But then, when customers get that order, then they're canceling with the 2 or 3 other orders that they placed. It's just, there's a lot of chaos in the markets in some cases. And so that's impacting costs, it's impacting productivity. Where I think you see the real separation and is really in the importance of relationships. So, that to me is really what's separating how people are able to build some reliability back in. It's not around the transactional and the digital aspects of where we've kind of come through all of this. It's really more in the relational aspects of the reliability, knowing the vendor that you can count on. And there's no digital substitute for that.
Right. So can you maybe get into a little bit more detail about, the digitization of all work is in a lot of, I used to deal with that in my past life, is just growing. But can you maybe talk a little bit more about the changing nature and relationship? That's kind of weird. The relationship between digital and relationships.
Yeah. And I think what's happened is we have been in this digital transformation, no matter what part of the society, what part of the economy we work and play in. And I think Amazon has been a big catalyst of this in terms of how we have just come to expect this seamless online digital experience and be able to go out and source, research that we did very quickly after the onset of the pandemic. We reached out to a lot of customers of distributors and specifically asked them how their vendor relationships changed, how they were sourcing and purchasing products and working with their vendors. And what we found was very quickly people increased the amount of self-service where they would go out. There's tons of product information in that. And what they really wanted to do was, for transactional stuff, they wanted that to be online, whether it was by text, by email, website, but that wasn't a substitute. After they'd gotten 80% of the information they wanted about a product, they wanted to talk with a representative, a specialist who knew how to apply that to their specific situation, to challenges that they were trying to solve. So I'm a big believer in the power of relationship in combination with digital tools and the power of that as well. So I think we're in this pendulum here, really, where that value-added service capability of the knowledge of the customer's problems and their operations, that's hard to replicate or provide digitally online. So I do feel like we're back in the future. I think that knowledge piece of this is going to still be a huge differentiating factor in how value is created in the supply chain.
Yeah, it's great. What's at stake if companies don't start to change, the way they interact with the supply chain as far as, for themselves, for their customers, other stakeholders?
There's a couple of different angles there as well. So I'm a glass half full kind of person. And as strong as the current state of the supply chain is, with all the challenges and the sort of the instability that we're working through and that market conditions have created, it's exposed some weaknesses in terms of risk exposure and transparency that I mentioned before. So I think we're already seeing there's movement and momentum towards reshoring and nearshoring to address the risk that we've seen. The Suez Canal obviously was a huge, international media event, essentially, it turned into, but it really was the kind of the signature event that just illustrated how that risk has played out in terms of more extended supply chain. And then the other piece of this is I think we're already seeing people leveraging technology to create this next version of the supply chain to improve visibility across the entire supply chain. So your question was really around, if we don't go in that direction, I think there are people and customers who are just pretty well set in the way that they've always sourced and kind of structured their supply chain. And I think they're going to still be vulnerable unless they sort of update and take a hard look at their own processes. Because I know that vendors have been incredibly motivated, and there's a lot of competitive opportunity there to just create this stability for customers. And I think that's where a lot of the future is going to play out.
Okay, so you've kind of laid that groundwork there, and so and you said something about the next level and transparent. You've mentioned transparency a couple times. You've also talked about the digital along with the personal relationship. So in your mind, I guess I ask you to look a little bit to the future. What does the world look like if more companies truly embrace this kind of balance to the way they approach the supply chain?
Yeah. So, a lot of people, I think, look to their vendors through a product lens. And I think where we're going is really more of this combined product, services, and even, I guess, service relationship from a standpoint of, and here's where I'm going with this, Todd, is if you think about preventive maintenance and all the sensors, all the chips challenges that have been, just think about the number of sensors and the Internet of Things in terms of the way that we're able to monitor equipment, whether it's moving equipment or plant equipment. And if you think about that and the capability, particularly for vendors and suppliers, to proactively go way beyond the products that they sell to kind of build in this as a much more comprehensive package. That's where all of this is going today. And I think it's what we've just been through here is really going to accelerate that. So it's much more of a complete product life cycle, production life cycle, so that you're going to get much more sort of cradle to grave solution providers. And that goes just beyond the core product sell, that really bundles in a lot more of that knowledge and the capability of maintaining that product through its entire life cycle or production lines, whatever it may be. So I think we're early in this stage, really, of this combination of sort of this digitalization of our world and acceleration of that. But this is where I really think the relationships play a key role, is because you can spray technology all over the place, and you see it a lot. People are spending a lot of money on technology, but the really incredible value creation is taking place where customers are saving a lot of money in their process improvement, in just their productivity rates in terms of what they're able to achieve. And honestly, you can't do that acting by yourself. It's really about partnerships, and I think ecosystems going forward. That's kind of a buzzword, but I really believe that. And it's this combination of that knowledge that a supplier can bring to the table that goes so far beyond just the core transactional product sale that you can do in your sleep online.
When you said ecosystem, that's one of the reasons I started this show, is to bring all the different silos or systems or ecosystems we work with, kind of bring them together. For example, bringing you on here to share your knowledge in the 19 different wholesale sectors that you kind of pay attention to on a regular basis, or some of our other people and even myself may not pay attention to. So what can we learn? So that's kind of how, it's one thing I'm hoping to do here with this kind of show. So I guess the question I would ask you, and maybe you can help our listeners out, is, how does a company start to get there and start to build these better relationships, especially with their current vendors, as opposed to, you mentioned way earlier, which was interesting, that, it's always good to have multiple relationships for a variety. I think that's kind of proven out this over the last 2 years, but you kind of said you don't want to spread it out too thin. You don't want to just use people to buy product and then cancel orders and all that stuff. So what would be the next thing a company could do to start getting in this kind of better position?
Yeah, there's a big answer wrapped in there, because I think this really is a sort of a shift in mindset. And, one of the things that we really monitored as a research organization, and we monitored very carefully, was as companies went into the pandemic, how quickly they were able to pivot from reactionary and sort of crisis mode to being able to start looking a little bit forward in terms of proactively where they could really find some opportunity and sort of their sweet spot in terms of how they could connect with customers, make sure they stayed close with customers and create value, which, was really the heart and soul of their business, right? It's the heart and soul of any business. And what I think we learned out of that was that, some organizations, it was very difficult for them to sort of take that next step, either going remote. Some organizations had already become a little bit more digitally savvy, had already put in teams. I mean, it's just kind of basic examples, but they were able to pivot, within a week or two, and online meetings weren't a big deal. And it sounds like, that's kind of a simple thing, but it was really a big deal initially. Taking that to higher levels, I think you see some companies not as open to how can we really leverage digital in a way that we can innovate, become more agile. I think a lot of what the last 2.5 years has for every organization opened up some questions about, hey, are we as agile as we really want to be or need to be to serve our markets and our customers as well as we can? I think a lot of organizations have answered that in really interesting ways. And it's not about company size. It's really more about the culture. It's about the mindset. It's about the leadership of those companies. And I just see every day we see some great examples of where companies have been able to free up the talent within them to really provide tons of value for customers in very specific applications, and then take that and replicate that out to the rest of the team. So it's the shift, I think, that's really taking place is I think it's pushing a lot of organizations to be more learning organizations ongoing and sort of lifelong learning organizations. And I think that's really a sort of a key shift that I haven't seen a lot about, talked about, but I think it's pretty fundamental.
What's your goal for the next 6 to 12 months? And how are you going to accomplish it?
For us, for 30 years, I've just been studying sort of value creation and differentiation in terms of an industrial construction markets. What does innovation look like? And we are in such a, I believe, even in spite of the unknowns of how 2023 is shaping out, there are so many longer term tailwinds that are going on in our economy that I'm really excited to see what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12, 24, 36 months. So my goal personally is for us to really, stay on top of these, I guess, not get caught up in the noise. It's really easy to pay attention to the national media, and it's just, it's one crisis after another every day. But if you're running a business, if you're trying to create value for your customers every day, there are things that you have in control here. And I really believe from a strategic standpoint that in turbulence, there's a lot of opportunity to gain market share, to find new ways to kind of create the next version of the business that's really going to be sustainable for longer term. So to me, those are the nuggets that's what's kept me really motivated. And I think we really have to keep our eyes open here over the next 6 to 12 months, because I really think they are going to be transformational, not only for our society and our economy as a whole, but I think for individual businesses in the markets that we serve. Electrification, infrastructure, these are all things that are, we've just started to see some of the things, and some of them are farther along. But gosh, if you look at the pieces, climate change, alternative energy, there's just so many areas. And there's a lot of challenges in navigating these kinds of transitions. But I just believe that, that's where the supply chain here is going to change very quickly. And there's just a ton of opportunity ahead.
So how can a leader differentiate what is noise versus what is valuable information and to inform their decision making?
I don't think there's any substitute for just reading and absorbing as much as you can. It's the leaders who I really admire. They are very disciplined about blocking out. Some of them block out an hour to 2 hours a day or more, and often that's early in the morning or late at night. And they're reading, they're digesting not just what's on the cable television stations. They're really also very disciplined about their own self-education and learning. And so I think, to me, that's kind of a key of leadership that I've always seen that I admire a lot, and I think is really a key to kind of being able to maintain that North Star instead of getting wrapped up in the day-to-day. There's a saying about the urgent getting in the way of the important, and I think we're just in that environment. I think that it's really easy to get wrapped up in that.
So we like to, Tom, close every conversation by refocusing on the why of what we do. So what motivates you to do this day in and day out? What keeps you excited and passionate about what you do?
I am such a core believer in the strength of the economy. I've been studying this for more than 30 years. In the current environment, I'm just learning something every day because it's so heavily fragmented. But the fundamentals of it really are, and what makes this, I think, the strongest and most adaptable economy in the world is the strength of the supply chain and the distribution networks that are in place, because you have this combination of both, small localized supply chain providers, and then you have the nationals. I think, the same applies in terms of the end markets that they serve, across manufacturing, construction, all the utilities, all of the other kind of core essential industries that really make up the fabric of the economy. And I really believe that it really is the complexity and the variety of it and the adaptability that makes it the most entrepreneurial. When a market condition changes, somebody sees an opportunity, that vacuum is going to be filled. And very quickly, there's a new solution, there's a new innovation that solves a problem that we've been trying to solve. So what I see from just the last couple of years is, we just have had one challenge after another being piled on. And I think that's just going to really foster innovation in ways that we haven't seen, honestly, in decades. We haven't had the same level of disruption. So, out of all this, I really believe these next couple of years are going to be fascinating. So that's what just really motivates me here over the next couple of years to really pay attention and see how we evolve in all of this.
Well, awesome. Tom, thank you for coming onto the show and sharing a perspective that I think is great for our audience to see and from an angle that they're not used to seeing it from. So it's been great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Todd. Very much a pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that was my conversation with Tom Gale, CEO of MDM. We talked a lot about strategy and tactics, and while those are important, there are two topics that really stood out to me. One was the importance of focusing on what will move us forward, like striking that balance between digital transformation and personal relationships. The other, and most meaningful to me, was learning to filter out the noise and instead focus on the innovative ideas that will, bring value to our customers. If you enjoyed the episode, you can help us grow the show by leaving a 5-star rating in Apple or Spotify and learn how you can connect with Tom and MDM by checking out the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of Keeping the Lights On. We'll see you next time.